right. So again, we have Eleni Bird and Tierra Brown from the Arc of PA, and we're going to be going over the Sensory Toolkit. And I don't know if you were here for our last presentation, but they did a great job of talking about, all of the systems that where we receive our sensory input and how that affects us. And I thought it was amazing, and I'm glad to have them back. So we're going to have questions afterwards. And if you could put your email and your name in the chat so we can keep sort of
We won't need to do that today.
you won't? Okay.
No,
All
no,
right.
because when they register
Oh,
for the Zoom, we have all that.
okay.
We do that for our LTF, so it's just a little slightly different. And I'm Roseanne, by the way, Roseanne Polishin. I'm one of the advocates here at the ARC of
Oh,
NEPA.
sorry, I forgot to introduce. She's very important. I can't forget her. She's so
No, you
important when I forget she's there.
introduce yourself too.
Gwendolyn, are you okay there? Did we able to fix that? I think that there's let's see here. Okay. There's a little audio issue there. So I'm just gonna admit it back in. There we go.
It's been an audio issue kind of day, I'm noticing. This is our second meeting, and we spent a good 15 minutes on audio issues before, so you're in good company.
Is that good now, Gwendolyn? Is it working?
She doesn't seem to be able to hear, but maybe that's on her end. Is anybody else having trouble hearing on this?
Oh, you know what? I don't know. Is everyone able to hear us?
You could just put it in the chat if you can.
If there's any issue, okay, let me put it in the chat. Yeah.
We
Oh,
can
she can hear
Okay,
us.
everybody can hear us. It might be on her end if she has the headphones or something on.
Oh, she does have headphones. Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Let's see. Maybe we'll try. Maybe see if she can do it without headphones. Um, hmm.
Sorry, my email's been really blowing up this morning, so it might grace our presence a few more times throughout the morning.
Let me see here.
All right, I
It's
think
funny because I can't actually send a message to her directly, so that's funny. But
it is weird. I probably would maybe we should just get started since it's like 5 after and people could trickle in, and since we started the recording already.
okay, all right, great. Okay, so again, we have Eleni Bird and Tierra Brown. And do you guys want to get started? We'd love to hear what you've got to say.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having us. So while we kind of get settled in, I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully the sound issues are in our rear view mirror and we're ready to enjoy our time together. I just want to make sure I can see everybody. My video panel's been disappearing on me all day. And I love to see these amazing faces or names on a gray background too. That's fine. But we're glad to have you, whichever form you take. So welcome. We joined you on Tuesday. Yep, on this past Tuesday to talk about sensory integration and sensory processing issues. And we did a little bit of a deep dive on some of those different things. So we're really happy to be back today to talk a little bit more about how to take that information and build a sensory toolbox with it. So before we dig in, I always want to kind of make sure that we know this is a safe space. We want to get to everyone's questions and comments. We do have a pretty short time today, but feel free to kind of drop questions in the chat as we go. We'll have some times where you can come off mute, or you can wait until the end when we stop the recording. If it's something that's a little bit more specific or sensitive, we can answer those questions then as well. So also, feel free to get up and stretch. We're adults here. Take care of your sensory needs, right? We'll be talking about that a lot. So if you need to stretch, if you need to wiggle, if you need to do whatever, doodle, snack, fidget, whatever you got to do, we're here for it. And you'll probably see me a couple times get up and down because I cannot sit still today. And I'm also a little over caffeinated, so that's fun. Here we are. All right, so I'm going to take a minute actually, I think Tiara's up first to introduce herself. So I'm going to give this over to her quickly, and then we'll keep on moving.
Good morning. As Eleni said, we're super excited to be back with you guys for part 2 of our sensory processing and toolbox kit, whatever the name of it is, but we're going to help you build your sensory toolboxes today. My name is Tiara Brown. As Eleni said, I'm her partner in the Lehigh Valley for the Include Me program. I'm gonna say what I said on Tuesday, but I'll give you a little bit more different stuff. So I've been in PA for about 5 years, but I'm from Norfolk, Virginia, which is outside of Virginia Beach. I do have a bachelor's in psychology, and I'm just gonna tell you that instead of reading all the other stuff that I said on Tuesday, I like Harry Potter. So I have Harry Potter tattoos. I am really obsessed, which is very millennial, apparently. The younger kids are telling me I'm old for liking Harry Potter, but it's cool. I love it, and it's my thing. But I am super excited to be here with you guys. Eleni's gonna do the first part of the presentation, and I'll come on toward the end.
Man, the things that these young people are taking away from us one thing at a time. That
I
is so
know.
cool.
I
Now,
love
I'm
them
like,
though.
no.
They're great. But man, I feel old.
Well, thank you, Tiara. As you know, here we go. I'm Eleni Bird. So I'm here. I'm not going to go through my experience too much again, but I love community organizing. I love working in the classroom and in all different areas of disability support. In these pictures, you'll see my kiddo at one of our Christmas light adventures that we did last year. You see my fur babies, which are, up in the corner, we have my dog Luna, and down in the corner, we have my cat, who is probably going to come up here and yell at me at some point because he knows that he has an audience now. And you'll see that I love roller skating and I love hiking, and I'm always out and about and doing what I can to keep this energy at bay. All right, so while we kind of get started, if you want to just take a minute, I know we have information on like your email address and all that good stuff. If you just want to, take a second in the chat and just let us know if you were here on Tuesday, and if you are a parent, or if you work in a school, or if you're a community professional. So and then we'll kind of go from there and see what kind of things we can learn together. So I'm gonna keep on keeping on. All right, so we talked a lot about sensory integration and processing last time. I do want to take a couple minutes to just watch a quick video that will get us kind of all caught up, make sure it reviews a little bit of what we talked about last time, and gets us set up to talk about some tools today. So I don't usually jump right into a video, but we're going to do that today. And if you can't hear it soon, let me know.
Yeah, well, to start, to kind of picture what a sensory issue is like, kind of picture sitting in a room, and no matter what angle you're sitting at, there's just an awkward little bit of light coming through the window in your eye. No matter where you go up, no matter where you sit. So no matter who's talking to you, no matter what you're trying to do, no matter what you hope to accomplish, whether it was making friends or just getting some work done or just relaxing, having that little light shine in, it can throw your entire perspective off. It's a battle of one, making sure you don't push yourself too hard. Make sure you don't put yourself in a situation where you might embarrass yourself in public. But at the same time, there's that desire to be around people, to be in that public.
This is Sean. Sean may look like you and I, but inside, things work a little differently. So what does this mean? Sensory processing is the method our nervous system uses to recognize, organize, and make sense of sensory inputs. In a brain that has sensory processing intact, the nervous system and brain are able to take in input from external and internal environments, filter out what is unimportant, and create an adaptive response to the different stimuli. In a brain where sensory processing is not intact, this is what happens. This can lead to a sensory overload. Sensory sensitivities make it hard to visit public spaces. 1 in 6 individuals like Sean have a sensory need, making this population the fastest growing demographic in the United States. Here's one way to help. Through companies like Culture City, venues are becoming inclusive to help people like Sean enjoy spaces without getting overstimulated. For example, headphones can help filter out noises in a scene like this, making it much easier for someone like Sean to relax. Other resources like fidget tools, weighted lap pads, and feeling thermometers can also be helpful in situations such as this.
I would say what I'd want people to learn about those sensory issues is that it's anchored in something inherently human. It's not an alien condition that people can't wrap their heads around like we thought for years and years. Not some sort of confusing thing with these people being weird and off. There is a relatability to it because it's anchored in an aspect of human perspective that everybody can relate to. You can sort of visualize the discomfort because that discomfort is inherently human.
By taking these measures, we will hopefully create a more inclusive and accepting environment for all. For more information, visit culturecity.org.
All right, so we'll talk a little bit more about Culture City at the end, but again, this is not an ad, so it's just a great option if you're looking for some for getting out. But I really think, understanding how shared these sensory experiences are, and how we can really learn, of not just how to recognize our own sensory needs, but also how to better support the sensory needs of the people in our lives who do have a more heightened experience. So let's talk a little bit more about when a student or your child might need those sensory coping strategies. So, teaching these coping strategies to use throughout the day. We might need them before, during, or after a task, especially before classes where they might be overwhelming, especially with sound, like music, gym. Sometimes even those less structured times like lunch and recess can be really overwhelming as well. And when they're frustrated with a task that's not preferred. But the thing to remember is these times are happening all the time. They're throughout the school day, they're throughout our time at home and in the community. So the most important thing is that as we work through these tools and learn about them and these different strategies and techniques, they have to be used in more spaces than just in crisis. So we know that teaching these tools during sensory meltdown is not the time to do it. So we want to make sure we're really proactive in doing that. So a lot of times when we talk about sensory, integration and sensory processing, we talk a lot about the what, but not as much about the how. So we're going to dig into that how a little bit more today. All right, so before we get into some specific tools and strategies, these are just some ways that no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, these are just great strategies to try to bring into every moment that you really can, anytime they're applicable. So in seating, whether that's in the classroom, around the house, when we go out to a restaurant, like any of these different scenarios, seating is so important. So we want to make sure that chair is a really good fit. So maybe they're sitting at a desk. The child should be able to put those feet flat on the floor and rest their elbows on that table surface in front of them. So You might have a child that, needs to move a bit. So you might have that inflated seat cushion, like a wiggle seat, or a pillow from home so that they can squirm and stay secure in that seat. We know that placement within that space is really important too. So whether it's sitting close to a teacher or where we're sitting in a theater, we want to make sure that we're in a position where we're not right next to a speaker, or we're not maybe too close to the movie screen, if we're in a theater. So a lot of different scenarios where that seating is really under talked about. It's the underdog in this conversation. We don't talk about it enough, I think. We're going to talk about sensory breaks and some ways, some things that you can include in a sensory break to kind of help that. So we want to do those pretty, frequently, and we want to make sure that we're keeping it flexible so that we can get that sensory input. We talked last week on Tuesday. Man, this has been a long week apparently. On Tuesday, we talked a lot about that sensory diet and having regular input of sensory feedback and how important that is for regulation. So we want to make sure those sensory breaks we're not skimpy on them. Again, we want to reduce or eliminate that input. So anything that's like a stressful visual or auditory input, like heating units, buzzing or flickering lights will send me into a tailspin quicker than you can say Tallahassee. And I'm sure a lot of your kids can probably relate to that. A lot of these things that some folks are able to really tune out. A lot of our kids with sensory integration or sensory processing issues really struggle to hear anything but that. So we heard that a little bit in that simulation on Tuesday, that we really felt that overlapping of sound. So we want to try to reduce any unnecessary input. We want to make sure we're giving really flexible breaks. And that can be a really tricky one because, knowing when and where to excuse yourself to take care of your sensory needs is something that everyone really struggles with, whether we're, diagnosed or not. So we want to make sure that we're doing that in ways that we can, even skip out on some things like a school assembly. Maybe we don't want to attend that school assembly because it's too overwhelming and we don't want to sit that long, and that's okay. Or sitting next to a door, that's really important to be able to visually know that you have an out from an overwhelming situation. So, to really not just offer flexible breaks, but build in flexibility for breaks. And last is to have a really clear schedule, which we're going to talk about on the next slide, about some of those routines and things and how important that is. So planning, schedules, routines, we all know that we crave that structure and that predictability and that consistency. So we want to make sure that we have that daily routine that's not changing a lot. But if it does need to change, that we're giving some advanced warning. And that looks different for every kiddo. Some kiddos that might increase anxiety depending on how we provide that advanced warning. So that's really important to know your kiddo when doing that. Again, we want to build in those brain breaks, those sensory breaks. We want to make sure that no moment in this child's day should feel like ongoing torture. We want to make sure we build in those breaks so that we can take a moment to breathe and come back to ourselves. This is a big one for being able to build a box around a task. So my son with homework, if he thinks that it's going to go on for hours and hours and hours and hours, he's just going to shut down. So we say, okay, you just got off the bus. We're going to take some time to relax. Here's your iPad. Here's a snack. Take some time to re-regulate. And I know for my child, that's okay to come off of iPad time. For everyone, it's a little bit different. And we have a start homework time. And I say, okay, at this time, we're going to stop for a break and then we'll reevaluate. So to really be able to give those chunks in a tangible way. And we want to post those visual schedules, directions, rules, expectations. A lot of that kind of seems very classroom specific, but I'm sure in your homes, it's come in different ways, and maybe with labeling or even like a calendar on the fridge. These things are really helpful to even add even more visual supports to them, and making sure that they're able to be used as a tool. And this last one is good for making sure that that we're using a lot of visuals. So this one is less about the planning and routines, but more about making sure that there's access to those choices. So now that we kind of went over the basics of like, here's some of our universal tips and tricks and strategies for things that any kid is going to benefit from having more of. So next I want to talk about some tools and strategies. Now, when we're looking at tools and strategies, it's going to be different for everyone that is receiving that strategy or that is using that strategy. So introducing new strategies has to really be systematic. So this is, I think, the least talked about thing in this conversation. Usually when we're sitting at a table and we're talking about sensory needs and sensory diets, we don't talk a lot about the methodology of like, how are we going to introduce this tool? So if you're not familiar, understood.org, not .com, .org, which we'll drop that in the chat, then has a phenomenal bank of resources to be able to use, especially surrounding different sensory needs and learning style differences and regulation, things like that. So I definitely recommend going to understood.org to use some of their tools. This is one of the tools that they offer. So this is a way that this template includes examples of a sensory diet. So I don't see, I think my example isn't here, but what you can do is you're using this to keep track of how your child feels before and after an activity. So this is a great, easy way to do that data collection so we know what effect these different tools are having. So if your child isn't responding positively to an activity, it's best to stop. And we want to make sure that's reflected on here so that when we're communicating with the classroom team or we're looking for different strategies to maybe write into some different plans, we know which ones are not to be explored in the classroom, especially too. So if you use the worksheet consistently, you'll notice patterns do emerge, and you'll start to see that the type of sensory input that your child needs, which we'll talk about some of those different types of input, and when they need it. So you might see that patterns are emerging of like different times of day, that could have to do with sleepiness or hunger, or it could have to do with the way that the light is coming in the window at that time of day. So there's a lot of different factors that we may not even notice until we start to see the data showing us the pattern. Again, I'll say this until I'm blue in the face. Always, always, always consult with an occupational therapist if you're interested in more about a sensory diet. They are going to be your best resource for figuring out what those different tools are and working through them in this systematic way. We know not everyone has access to an OT, so definitely reach out to us and we can try to provide some resources, but they're going to be your expert.
Is there like a list somewhere maybe that could just give you some ideas that like if you're sleepy or anxious, like what activity might like get you going and
Yeah,
if
so
you're
we're gonna
overstimulated, what will calm you? If you're understimulated, what will get you more engaged?
Right, and that's going to be a little bit different for everyone. So we're going to go into that next on
Oh,
specific
perfect.
like types of fidgets, types of tools, different like even strategies that don't require a prop of any kind. So different things like that. And it's as you're kind of thinking about oh, this could be great for my kid, or that totally isn't going to work for my kid. You don't really maybe need a worksheet for those things that you just know because your kiddo, or your student. But if you're kind of just going into this new and you're like, where do I even start? It's really great to start in a really systematic way. So another thing about, especially with fidgets, because we know that fidgets can be a little bit of a hot topic. So that's actually what we're going to talk about next. We're going to dig right into fidgets after this. But this is a really great tool, another tool from understood.com, that really establishes those expectations, especially for if they're going to be going into the classroom with these tools. So fidgets like squeeze balls, spinners, which we'll talk about next, can be really helpful tools, but fidgets are supposed to be tools, not toys. And that's a really, really important thing to teach our kids as we're using these. So without the right guidance, they can easily be misused and become a distraction or even dangerous depending on what the fidget is itself. So the fidget contract kind of helps give direction on how to use that fidget. It sets those expectations about what the fidget's for. It also lets you and your child agree on when, where, and how that fidget can be used. So this is a sample one, which we can share this out too. That's a great way to, like set those expectations. So definitely, review that contract with your child. And this might not be an appropriate version for a kindergartner or a first grader. So, with that said, we can definitely help create a more age appropriate version of this. But this is meant to be shared with the school team, especially, and to try to get them on board with understanding that if this child's going to be bringing a fidget into the room, it's going to be in a systematic way. And of course, that is an IEP decision, IEP team decision as well. So what might work for one child might not work for another. So, part of setting up this agreement and making sure we communicate to the child, I think that there are some really great places to start with non-negotiables. So one is to be mindful. So before they grab that fidget, think about whether you need it, if you really need it. If you don't, go to rule two, which is I can only use a fidget to help excuse me, to help with focus and attention or to calm down. Otherwise, the fidget may be removed. So another one is like to not use that fidget if it's distracting others or interferes with the work that others are doing. So if that fidget does distract or interfere with their work, that they might have to use a different strategy. So these are all rules that are kind of built into this contract too. So and of course we want to make sure that they know those basic housekeeping rules are like, when you're done with the fidget, make sure we put it back in our designated area, whatever that is. So a lot of different options to choose from. So let's dig right in, and because we are at 11:30 already, so I want to make sure we don't miss any. Okay, so we have lots of different types of sensory tools and fidgets. So, and we have even more options after this, but this is kind of where everyone loves to land first. So, there's different effects that fidgets are going to have. So the first one I like to talk about is a calming fidget, because I think that's the one that a lot of people use fidgets for the most. So sometimes kids might need help feeling settled so that they can sustain their attention. So like wiki sticks could be a good one. If you're not familiar with wiki sticks, it's pieces of like thicker string that are coated in wax, and they can kind of be shaped into different shapes, and they can be kind of stuck together, and they can be made into different forms, and they're a fun time. So there's also different like calming options like extra fuzzy pipe cleaners or plastic nuts and bolts. And I've also even used metal nuts and bolts for kiddos who are in the high school, who really like the spinning up and down the bolt. And the metal version was a much more age appropriate thing for them to carry around with them than like a Fisher Price big plastic bolt kind of thing, which is something that we might use in the younger ages. There's also the coiled bracelets and keychains and weighted lap pads. So these are all things that are, grounding in nature. So you might notice that the weighted lap pad is giving that the feedback for our interoception and vestibular system. So if you were here on Tuesday, you'll remember those terms as part of our sensory system. Actually, two of the parts of our sensory system that we talk about the least. So these are the which we can review them a little bit more if we have time at the end. So those are some calming fidgets. We also have alerting fidgets. So a fidget that helps a student stay alert. So for some kids, a little noise, color, or light can actually help with focus. So if kids need that stimulation, fidget like clicks. So let's see, where are they up here? You can kind of see them. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but they're right over here where they're kind of, and there's some up here too. So these clicks are kind of like a track of like clickable things, and that snapping and clicking is a really great way. Like I said last time, it's like a crunchy kind of experience. So it really helps with those more alerting scenarios where you need to be more alert. We also have pop tubes, which are a really good one. So those are like more of they like are sticking together, and then when they pop, there's that. But there's also the ones where you stretch them out and they're like so a lot of them are really multisensory. You know, you have the visual of it growing or shrinking, you have it changing shape, but you also have the auditory of the clicking or the stretching and the coming back together. And they also have the tactile experience of the vibrations of it moving in and out and doing all that. So there's it's really a multi sensory experience. However, you may notice that this might be a little disruptive for classrooms or other settings. So this is where this might be really great to use at home during like a study session or while listening to an audiobook, or even while transitioning through the community into spaces that might be potentially stressful or where we just don't know as much about what to expect in that environment. All right, so chewing fidgets. I love a good chewing fidget. So we know that there's pencil top chewers that we have. There's also pendant chewers that we have. And they're starting to make some different options that are a little bit more age appropriate for the older kiddos. But even then, we might suggest gum or some kind of like chewing candy, like a Tootsie Roll or like a Starburst or something chewy, where we're getting that deep pressure in the jaw that's giving us that regulation opportunity again. Sometimes we might want something crunchy so that it can have that same alerting type of effect. All right. So resistance fidgets. So these are some of my favorite, and I think Tiara probably agrees because we use them all the time, is putty. So Silly Putty is a classic toy that is really, really great for not just building hand strength, but also getting that resistance. So, you know, we're seeing that it has a similar effect to heavy work, which we'll talk about shortly. So we'll see that some other options that still give resistance but aren't necessarily putty might be kneaded erasers, ponytail holders, stress balls, corks for picking apart if we have any pickers, like squishy toys, and a lot of magnetic kind of stuff where that push-pull. So these all are going to have that same resistance kind of feedback. I want to go into the research, but I don't think we have time. If you're interested in more research, there's a lot of different levels of research out there on fidgets and the effects of fidgets. They're one of the more reputable and larger scale studies are actually on stress balls. So if you're interested in that, I can definitely pass that along. So resistance fidgets are some of the most well researched. We also have tactile fidgets, so different like textures, like sticky, gooey, slimy, hairy, scratchy, all that kind of good stuff. And you might notice I think one of the most classic fidgets is a koosh ball, which was huge when I was little. And it's kind of like that, it's not quite fuzzy. It's a similar texture to this guy here, but it's a ball. Oh, there's a koosh ball. And it kind of is like that plastic hairy thing. And that's like a great texture that's giving light touch. So that's a great way to be able to, and you're even getting the resistance if you want to pull the bands, if it's a stronger one too, because those kooshes can handle it, but some of the new ones I'm not so sure. So some of those other tactile fidgets might be play foam and kinetic sand, Velcro strips, the popping beads, and then like those rubbery, like the squeeze toys. So there's a couple different versions of those. And last, I always want to talk about the most popular fidget that we kind of brought a lot of people into the fidget world is spinners. So fidget spinners are, I think, the very like I like to call them the Taylor Swift of the sensory toy community because everybody knows them and everyone has an opinion on them. So it's really important to remember that a lot of the controversy that came out of the fidget spinner era was based on bad methodology. That, you know, when you give a room full of 10-year-olds toys without instruction, it's not going to go well. So it's a really important thing to remember that, you know, what works for one kid doesn't work for another. So some kids with attention find that the weight and the motion of the whizzing is really helpful for focusing, but other kids, and their parents and teachers probably will agree, that they find that movement and tactile input to be really distracting. So this is a really divisive tool, but it's so popular. And if you walk into any store, you're going to see fidget spinners in the checkout aisle probably. So a lot of schools have really specific guidelines about fidget spinners because of all of that. So make sure, if that's a tool that you're exploring, that you explore those school policies, and make sure you're ready to go into the IEP team with a really well-crafted thought and plan for how to make that happen. All right, so a lot of you might be familiar with the fun, low-cost sensory bags that you can make. So I know these have been around for a while, but these are really great way where you're like, I don't want to spend more than like a couple bucks at the dollar store, and I want some bang for my buck. These are a great way to do it. So these are for small items, where you can even have like a seek and find kind of option, or it can just be purely sensory. Like, we're just vibing with it. We're not looking for anything specific. Both options are totally okay. And you want to make sure those are sealed together. So I don't want to spend too much time on this today. We can talk a little bit more about how to make that. If you want some plans, we can share those. Okay, so I want to talk more about heavy work. So we talked last time about the vestibular system, which is all about our balance and our positioning of head within, or our head within space. Oh, excuse me. And we also talked about the proprioceptive system, which is understanding how our body moves through space and where the space that we occupy. So one of the best strategies is through for support for both the vestibular and proprioceptive systems is heavy work and big gross motor movement. So most people get enough of that physical input through daily activities, but a lot of kids with sensory processing issues may not. So they might need help, extra help, like jump starting those systems that control balance and movement and body awareness. And that's where those heavy work activities come in. So heavy work is a type of activity that pushes or pulls against the body. So it could be something like swimming or vacuuming. With those activities, the resistance of the water or the vacuum creator is what creates that push or pull. So, you know, kids with that sensory, processing issues might often like seek or avoid, as we learned that hyper versus hypo, sensitivity, they might seek or avoid sensory input. So kids who seek input are looking for that deep pressure. So that can really help calm the body and make them feel more oriented in space, which I don't know about you, but when I feel like I'm not oriented in space, nothing feels right. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but it's a very, it's disorienting. So without those heavy work activities, they might seek that input through like crashing into things or jumping off of things. And that can be really dangerous. We know that those are not safe heavy work options. So heavy work is designed to provide that input in a safer, more consistent way. So when they do that heavy work throughout the day, they can, feel more organized before they need to seek input. So some of the best heavy work activities are like activate as many muscles and joints as possible at the same time and for a short period of time. So it's like if we could do just like a full body clench and then let go, that would be a great heavy work exercise that can be really hard to conceptualize for kids. So activities like swimming and vacuuming, like we said, are great options. But I don't know about you, but I don't have a pool in my house or in my classroom, and I sure don't, have, access to be vacuuming whenever I need to. That is my son's school calling. We will call them back after. So Some of the things that we might suggest are hand presses. So this is where you're taking those hands together and you're having them push as hard as they can together, because we're really activating this entire upper ring of muscles. And a lot of times when we're really activated or we're getting activated, this is where it lands, in our hands and our upper body. So really taking that and getting that deep pressure input by pushing against them in hand presses is really helpful. Another one is wall sits. Not everybody likes a wall sit, and that's okay, but this is going to be that same like full body, heavy work, kind of pushing in. One of my favorite things to do in a classroom, I feel like probably half the classrooms that I walked in for consult, at some point we're doing wall push-ups, because it's a really great way to get that whole body involved without having to get on the ground and do actual push-ups. So we might have our hands on the wall, doing that push-up. And if this is part of something at home, maybe you want to put a little image on the wall of where to put hands, maybe where to put feet, and that can just be part of their routine. Whew. All right, so we also have the resistance bands on desk. So this allows the kid to be able to bounce. Definitely consult with an occupational therapist with this, because we want to make sure, again, that chair fit is right. So that was one of the first things we talked about, is how important seating is. And to be able to, make sure that the positioning is correct, but also be able to get that lower body, resistance and in. All right. Okay, so we want to make sure that we're always keeping seating flexible. Like we said before, there's lots of different options. Obviously, we're looking at a classroom here, but these types of things can be used at home. I mean, I have a yoga ball at home. I have 2 different types of chairs up here because I can never seem to choose which one I like on that specific day. But even letting kids, walk around while they're doing homework. For years, I tried to do a homework at the table policy, and it was a lost cause. It was never going to work. So at that point in the day, my kiddo, he needed the flexibility and freedom to walk around his room with a clipboard and to be able to do it that way. And that worked for him. So definitely, keep those expectations flexible. One of my favorites, noise canceling headphones. We saw our friends at Culture City. This is one thing that they, provide in their kits. But there's so many different options now. So before, it used to just be like the big, bulky, squeezing headphones, and that was like the only option. And if you didn't want your head squeezed into oblivion, there was no other options. But now it's so much better. We have the ones that are a little bit more light pressure on the ears. There's more full coverage. There's also in the ear supports where it's more of a filter. So that might, depending on what tactile sensory needs your kiddo has, that might be a different way to trial different types of headphones, because some kiddos are not going to want in the ear, some kiddos are not going to want the pressure of over the ear. So there's so many more options now than there used to be. And when we don't have them, or if it's like a surprise situation, we want to make sure that we try to give a little bit of advanced warning, some verbal reminders of when loud noises might be coming up, like a school bell, or different things like that. All right. All right, so we have secret hand signals. So this is a really great way, especially for students who are very sound sensitive. So a lot of times, any type of verbal redirection can really add to that pile of sensory input. So if you have a kid who's maybe not showing signs but already feeling a little dysregulated in some way, this is a great way to kind of check in and be like, hey, are you okay? Or or something like, hey, we're gonna go now, or to give some kind of secret hand signal to that individual or the kiddo, so that they don't need to also process additional sound input of directions and verbal processing. So sometimes that's really helpful too. All right. We obviously making a quiet space where students can safely calm down is super important, and making sure you can always see, the kiddos in that area or students. So I think because of time, I want to just go right into sensory rooms, because I think this is one of another hot topic in the sensory conversation is everyone's talking about sensory rooms. So this is that space that's designed to help an individual, learn to regulate the brain's negative reactions to external stimuli. So, and sometimes it might be a whole room, sometimes it might just be a corner of a larger room. And the contents and the design of that space should be tailored to each individual's needs. And in shared spaces like a classroom, that might look a little bit different. But extreme sensory issues will be dealing, or folks students with extreme sensory issues will be dealing with different stimuli and have different requirements when it comes to learning to cope with that world around them. So we want to make sure that there are calming effects. We want to have those calming tools in there. We also want to make sure we have those stimulation tools in there. But third, the social piece is something that a lot of people are starting to talk about more. So some individuals may prefer to use a sensory room alone or sensory space alone, but it can also be a really great way to practice interacting with each other in that space. So the idea is that it's a safe, stress-free space. You can tell the coffee's catching up with me a little bit. That allows children to move and explore together. But it can really help them. They can practice becoming more aware of how their bodies and move and how to control those movements when they're around others. So that's a really great opportunity as well. We also, I'm going to skip some of these things. We have a video that shows a sensory room, but we can always share that out again. I think we are probably out of time to watch that. But I'll drop that in the chat, and here we go. I'm going to turn it over to Tiara for a couple minutes. Is it okay if I wanted to leave a little time for questions? So do we want to take a quick pause before we continue and see if anyone has questions about those tools so far?
Sure. Whatever you would like to do. Does anybody have any questions? I mean, I thought it was a great presentation. I think a lot of people put some cool things in the chat, actually,
Yeah.
about things that they had sort of used or had experience with. We didn't see any questions pop up in the chat, but I think that, does anybody have any questions?
And again, we can leave time at the end if you don't want them recorded.
Yes. Okay.
All right. Tiara, I'm going to leave it up to you to skip what you feel.
Gotcha. I do want to talk about giving instructions for your sensory toolkits and areas though. And I will say that these suggestions are more specific to the classroom, but if you're a parent, it's a great starting point for self-advocacy for your child. And also you can use, like Eleni said, you can use some of these reminders in homework or some of the things that you're doing at home. So we want to make sure that we can help when we're giving instruction, we can reduce the need for handwriting, which a cool resource to use. So instead of having your worksheets or stuff have short answer questions, they can have fill in the blanks, which is less work. You can allow extra time for writing or use speech to text software on a computer, we love that at the ARC. We love just talking into Microsoft Word and letting it copy whatever we're saying. But it's a great way to help with accommodate for motor skill fatigues and helping them just be able to get what they need to get done on paper, but they don't have to write it. It's really great. We want to reduce the amount of visual information on the page and use blank pieces of paper to cover up all but a few questions on the page, which I believe we'll talk about a little bit, but we like to use Post-it notes, which is a cheap, low tech assistive tech to help focus and help focus and regulate our sensory things on our papers. So those are really good tips. was like, what's the word for this? Oh, I skipped it. I'm sorry. So
Do you want to just keep on going?
Yeah.
All right.
Some other things, I was like, we'll keep on going, but some other things is manila folders to block distractions, pencil grips, slant boards, and bold or raised line paper for writing. And again, all of this is just to accommodate motor skill fatigues and hit all of those other sensory processing issues that we might have. Highlighters, sticky notes, and also listening to music, which we talked about on Tuesday, but maybe having like calming music in the background, or music not without lyrics, that helps kind of keep everyone calm and regulated. And you can go ahead, Eleni. Okay, I want to do a discussion, but we don't have time. So I'm gonna throw these questions out, and you can put them in the chat because I would love to hear your answers. But what would you include in your own sensory toolbox, and what would you include in a sensory toolbox for your specific student or classroom? And I know for me, I always have, like Eleni said, normally always have putty and headphones in ours because we have to focus a lot. And so I really would love to hear what you guys have to say, but we're going to skip on through that.
Mhm.
And then just to remember, like, these boxes and toolkits don't have to stay the same. They can be changed. Like the slide said, it can be changed for the season. People have done specific holiday ones in just teaching or theme. It's great. So don't be stuck in the box. You can change as much as you want. The location can be changed to support students. Again, sometimes a lot of our schools are overpopulated, and you might not can't, or you don't have the room for a sensory room. So maybe it's a corner, maybe it is a hallway, which is really becoming popular, is doing a sensory hallway so that when the kids walk through, they can do feels and they can jump or on steps or footprints. So it's just a really cool way to add those things. Also remembering that it has to be super accessible to our students, and you can create small traveling ones. We have one when we go to conferences that has some sensory tools and fidgets for us when we're either doing presentations or we're sitting trying to make sure that we can stay focused. So you can create little toolboxes to take on the go.
And truly, I think they're becoming so much more acceptable in public spaces than they've
Yeah.
ever been before for anyone to use for any conditions. Like, I can't tell you how many times anytime I go out, I have 2 fidget spinners and one of the mini putties in my backpack at all times, because most of my friends have some flavor of neurospice, whether it's anxiety, sensory processing themselves, whatever it is. So I've noticed that even in a restaurant, I'm like, hey buddy, are you, like, to my friend, like, dude, you okay? Do you need a spinner?
Yeah.
So it's becoming so much more normal.
And even one that we don't necessarily talk about as often as temperature. So I constantly run hot, and if I'm hot, I cannot focus. And so I keep like little mini fans. I got a pack for like $5 off of Amazon, and I just throw them in every purse, every wallet, anything that I use to get around. But it's helpful when I just need to take a break and just fan myself because I'm hot, but it does help me focus and it does help regulate my body. And the sweet thing is, a lot of these things are yeah, I saw some lotion and chaps, all of those needs help. But a lot of these things are super cheap, and you can find of like super easily in your stores like Walmart and Target, the Dollar Tree. We love, well, I guess it's not a dollar anymore, it's 125, but still it's cheap. And then a lot of cool things is a lot of swag from different conferences, and places are giving out these things for free. So there's different ways. You just have to be creative on how to build your toolkit for cheap. But you can also buy. Amazon is fantastic. I want to shout out Target, because Target in their like $3 to $5 section a lot of the time has different tools and sensory fidgets in their section. So it doesn't have to be expensive. You don't have to get top brand, but you can get the things that you need.
Five Below is a great spot too. They always
Five
keep
Below
really,
is
they're like
good.
some of the most novel ones end up there. So all right, so these are a couple sensory rooms that we've done with groups, or I'm sorry, with school districts. Tira, do you want to explain it or do you want me to just play?
I feel like they're pretty explanatory.
Yeah.
This is a sensory room we have in the Pittsburgh area that our colleagues worked on in that area for a school district. So they're pretty short, but I just want to give you a look around of what they could look like.
All right.
Sensory rooms are spaces designed to help regulate.
I'm gonna just turn the voice off though, and we can kind of read it on our own. But it's really great for, you know, that stimuli, regulating stimuli. So this is one of the stages of it.
And the cool thing, they're constantly adding to this room too. So this was like the starter stage, but there's so much more in the room now.
Mhm. And you'll see that even on the ceiling, there's light covers, which is really great for, you know, students that have that light sensitivity. We'll just hop right into this one and keep talking about some of the things that we might see. So, you know, we have visual alarm clocks in there, lots of different relaxing colors, lights. You know, we love the LED strips. I haven't met a kid that doesn't love a good LED strip. You know, communication super important. We have the vestibular sensory swings, which you see those a lot in like physical therapy and occupational therapy spaces. Bubble tubes are giving us visual stimulation, tactile, the vibrations, lots of different types of sensory feedback, lots of fidgets and fidget adjacent toys. And we love a weighted stuffed animal or a weighted blanket. They've gotten so cute over time. I remember for a long time they were just a blanket.
No. And particularly there's a sloth one that's really great. And I know.
I just saw a new one that's filled with glass beads, and it holds heat and cold. I don't know if I would give that one to a kiddo because it's filled with glass beads, but if you're, you know, a more low energy regulator, that might be a really great option for temperature also.
And I just want to do a quick shout out to a community resource because they are doing really incredible things. So a community, if you can go to the next slide, Eleni, that'd be great. A community resource we talked about them a little bit earlier, but Culture City, which is again a nonprofit working towards sensory accessibility and acceptance for those with invisible disabilities. So what's really cool about Culture City is they develop sensory rooms and sensory bags for concerts and different festivals. And so you could, if you need a sensory break, they have little inflatable rooms where it had different strategies like we just shown in the video, like calming tubes or LED lights, soft lights, flexible seatings that people can take a break during festivals. They also give out sensory bags with headphones and a couple of fidgets. And so it's a very cool nonprofit. We'll put the web link in the chat because it's something worth really looking through because they're doing really cool things. And I will shout out, they worked with Coldplay in their more recent world tour and gave sensory bags out and again made portable sensory rooms. And that is the hope, that we can make things more accessible for people who suffer with sensory processing disorders and just need a little break but want to enjoy stuff because we're all about including. And that is all I
I
think
wanted to share a couple Culture City spaces in the Lehigh Valley and surrounding, just in case
got
you're
it.
so Pocono Raceway, up near you guys. So that they do have Culture City options. So you should be able to get headphones or a sensory bag. I'm not sure exactly what they have there, but Culture City does have a partnership with Pocono Raceway, the Lehigh Valley Zoo, and the PP&L Center. So if you're looking at any of those spaces, definitely
Mm.
check out Culture City's website, and they will have resources on site for you. So lots of options. Tiara, do you wanna wrap up, or what do we wanna do?
I feel like we're at our time, and I just want to
I
make
think
sure
so.
if there's questions, we can answer them. But I will say that everybody can benefit from our understanding of sensory integration and having access to sensory toolboxes. So we really want to thank you guys for wanting to know more and trying to implement these things in your children's or your lives, because it's super important in an accessibility lens. So thanks so much.
Does anybody have any questions? That was a great presentation, just like the last one. And I learned a lot. And I'm really big into sensory stuff. So I mean, I always love learning new things about that. Uh, does anybody have any questions? Somebody brought up bringing it to Hershey Park,
Love that.
the Culture City. Is there any way that somebody would be able to do something like that? Would they have to write to Culture City or Hershey Park, or what do you think would be a good way to do something like that? Or Dorney Park?
So I believe there is a way that you can connect with them and talk to them about bringing it closer or in the areas you're looking for, which you can find that all on their contact part in their website.
I believe it is a certification process for venues, organizations, or small businesses, or even individuals, to be able to do. There's like a sensory inclusive certification. So I believe that's what most of the spaces do. I would definitely reach out to them directly and
Yeah.
see if they have an outreach team, because I think that I can't imagine that any of these, parks, whether it's Hershey, Dorney, or anything in between, would definitely be wise to consider bringing a service like this in to support patrons.
Very cool. Okay. That's a great idea. Let's see here.
Do
So
we
does
wanna
anyone have any questions though? Everybody seems really happy with the presentation as well. Did somebody say something?
do we if we anyone wants to ask
Oh,
any questions when we're outside of recording, I can stop that if that's okay.
yes, let's
I
stop the
think
recording. Mhm.